Attending, along with several other my colleagues yesterday morning, the police memorial recognition dedication to something that not only is beautiful, but hopefully we'll never have to use that memorial for any falling officers, but it's a just marvelous tribute to them, and I was very proud to attend along with several other my colleagues.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, we'll go ahead and go to item 3.3. The mayor and city councilors are here shall be provided with a proposed budget overview on the fiscal year 2018-2019, fiscal year 18-19 operating budget and capital improvement plan. City manager, take it away.
Mayor Price, Vice Mayor Chapados, members of the council, I'm here to give you a presentation on our proposed budget for fiscal year 18-19. To get to this point, we have done a lot of work. Directors identified their needs. We had individual meetings to go over those. We had department director level meetings with everybody to go over them. We had two lengthy discussions with the Budget, Finance, and Operations Committee meeting, one on the capital improvement program and one on the operational budget. And I'm here today to show you the fruition of all of those discussions and analysis. As soon as So when we were putting the budget together, what we were focusing on was the city's vision, if you will, for a family-friendly, vibrant community. But also what we were trying to do is balance achieving financial stability in the long run by meeting today's needs and preparing for tomorrow. So I think what you're going to see is the culmination of that in terms of the priorities that we're budgeting, the positions that we're proposing to be budgeted to meet those needs. I want to talk a little bit about growth because growth feeds into revenue and revenue feeds into operational capacity within the organization. This is your 5-year permit activity. As you can see, everything's trending upwards, which is very good because permits equal houses and businesses, which equals revenue for the city. The numbers on the right are for the inspection line, which is the red line. The numbers on the left are for all the permits that we have issued in the last few years. So it's trending very nicely upwards. Passport activity, this is more of an internal operational measure, if you will, in terms of people coming through the door to get passports. The fiscal year 17-18 numbers are through April. I anticipate that the total will be close to what we had last year, if you will. In terms of positions within the organization, we've maintained pretty steady numbers for the last few years. As of right now, we have 318 full-time equivalent positions. Fire and medical runs, you can see a steady increase in the workload for our fire department. I only anticipate that will continue to grow as we build new houses and new businesses open up within the city. Fire inspections and investigations, the same thing. You'll see huge increases in the last few years in terms of fire inspections. Fire investigations are staying pretty low, which is a good thing. And then for the police department, you're going to see a growth in terms of calls for service, dispatched calls for officers. And again, that's only going to grow because we're adding new houses, we're adding new businesses. So as you grow our housing population and our businesses, you're going to get more calls for service. And this leads into revenues. Local taxes. What we've seen here is that you're seeing a nice upward tick in terms of our revenues from local taxes. What we identified there is key businesses that have come in during that, so those kind of contribute to those spikes, if you will. I will point out that the Edison Point ones for 2018, we haven't identified what those businesses are going to bring in, so we're putting capacity in the budget. So as those revenues come in, if you want to spend them, you can. If you want to save them, you have that ability as well. But you've got a lot of businesses coming online right now, Denny's, Planet Fitness. That's only going to grow your revenue base for next year. But right now, we haven't budgeted for those. So you got the capacity, but we haven't allotted it to anything. And this is where your property tax dollars go, because we get a lot of, I think, questions from the community and the public in terms of, I think some of them think that every dollar that is collected for property taxes goes to the city, and that's not the case. We get less than a third of every dollar. The majority of it, almost half of it, goes to schools, either public schools or community colleges. State taxes, those are ticking upwards a little bit. State sales tax and use tax had a little bit of dip. Keep in mind for state sales and use tax, which is the red line, is a 2-year lag. So the numbers you're seeing for 2018 were actually collected in 2016. And then local licenses and permits, that big spike you see in the blue line for other revenues was the sale of the fire admin trailers that were by 347 a few years ago, the ones that were just demolished in preparation for 347 to begin. But as you can see, our licenses and permits are going up, and all indications are that that upward spike will maintain for this next fiscal year. I do want to point out that there are a lot of businesses coming online right now or in the next few months that will be bringing in revenues for next fiscal year that we haven't budgeted for. So again, we're going to give you the capacity to spend that money if you want, but we haven't allotted it to anything specifically. So your revenues are only going to grow next year with these. I'd also like to point out that there are some things coming down the road in the next few years, hopefully, that are going to only add to your revenue streams long term. You know, economic development is a long game. It takes a while. You know, it takes a lot of work to get businesses to come in. You've got a game changer coming in the next year with the 347 overpass. When that happens, growth on the south side is going to grow tremendously. It's just going to expand. Along with that, we've got Copper Sky Commercial that hopefully will be coming for you. Right now, what we're planning on is coming before you in August to discuss Copper Sky Commercial. We're working right now with a master planner, and so we should be coming to you in August, and hopefully that'll kick off. And I think the fact that 347 is started and will be finished next year will be a big impetus for Copper Sky Commercial actually moving forward and work being done on that. And one of the priorities for that is a hotel. Once you get a hotel in the mix, your revenues will expand. You're going to have different revenue streams, and I think it can be a game changer for you. So that hopefully will be coming online in the next few years and will only add to the revenue streams that you see here today. The other one is Estrella Gin. We're going to be coming to you in August as well on what's going on with Estrella Gin. If we can get that up and running in the next few years, that's going to give you 2 different revenue streams, if you will, to expand your revenue base for the city. And it's only going to help the city grow, and it's going to lead to other things. So you've got some things coming down the road that I think are going to position the city well in the future in terms of revenues. So here's the revenue forecast for next fiscal year. I want to point out a couple of things. I tried to put as many bullet points as the bottom as possible so you didn't have to interpret the numbers. Because I asked, why did licenses and permits go down next year when everything's trending upwards? And it was because, based on an audit report, they moved $1.1 million from that line item for next year to local taxes. So that line item for licenses and permits would actually have grown another $1.1 million, but we just moved it to another line to be consistent with auditors and how they handled the money. The other item is fees, fines, and charges. That's got a nice increase for next year that we're projecting. So we've got a total revenue forecast for next fiscal year of $42 million for the city. I wanted to bring expenditures up front in terms of the presentation because I didn't want you to have to go back to what our revenues were projected to be and then compare it to the expenditures. Our expenditures for next fiscal year are just a little below what the revenues are. Where are you? He's smiling over there. The uptick in personnel is because of several things. One, we've got salary adjustments included in there. Minimum wage increases, especially for Copper Sky, are taking a big hit for us next year because of the minimum wage increases. Our benefit costs are going up. We've got about $700,000 in that $29.7 million for new positions in this year's budget. So the bulk of the increase is really the benefits and some other costs. The other thing to think about is this year, because the auction contribution has gone away, we're moving parks maintenance positions from Copper Sky, which was a separate fund, into the general fund. So that's going to increase the personnel cost, that line item right there. So that's part of that mix as well. And then contingency, we were going to budget it at $1 million, and then we realized that we needed to build in capacity. So if the revenues come in really well and you want to spend them, you better have the capacity in the budget to do that. So we added another $500,000 to the contingency, but it's kind of a set-aside money for you. My recommendation would be to look at your financials mid-year, and if they're coming in as robust as what we think they are going to come in, maybe you want to look at some mid-year adjustments, either some new positions or fund some programs or whatever you want to do. But I would take a look at that probably December or January and look at that. But we did build that capacity in there for you, so if you want it, it'll be there. You have the authority to do it. The fund balance, which is really the purple line down at the bottom, the one that's trending downward, the only line trending downward. We plan on coming to the Budget and Finance and Operations Committee probably in June to discuss this in ways that we can hopefully change the trajectory of that line to a little up. Right now, it's based on transferring $2.9 million out annually. The 18-19 numbers there, the very first, that is based on fully funding the fire admin building. We're not going to spend the 4.65, whatever. Brady can tell me what the exact number is. This fiscal year, we've budgeted for it, so the capacity is there, but I don't think there's any way that we can design a fire admin building and build a fire admin building in a year. So I think the bulk of that 4.6 million that's front-loaded in 18-19 will carry over to another fiscal year. The other years, 19-20 and beyond, they've budgeted 2.9 transfer from the fund balance to the budget, and I think we need to look at that with the Budget and Finance and Operations Committee meeting, because we don't have any other huge capital projects anticipated for a couple of years, and so I don't think you need to transfer 2.9 million, but right now that's what that shows. So I think we can change the trajectory of that a little bit, and we'll have that discussion with BFO. We've got state budget impacts here. If you have any questions on these, I would call Dale up to answer those questions. The legislature is always a wild card. You never know what they're going to do and what the impacts are going to be. So if you have any questions, I can have Dale come up and talk.
Council questions on that? I think we've been
Okay.
kept up to par. Thank you.
So I want to kind of summarize revenue and say that it's looking very positive for you. You've got a lot of new revenue streams coming online. You've got the potential for future ones with Estrella Gin and with Copper Sky Commercial. And when 347 overpass is done, I think that's going to open up the south side, and hopefully you're going to see some more retail over there in terms of also housing growth as well. And then if you piggyback that with the approval to collect taxes for widening of 347 into Maricopa, again, it's a long game. Your economic development is always a long game, and transportation is a key part of that. But you started on the right path with that. So in the future, when that starts happening, like the 347 overpass is, it's only going to enhance your revenue in the future and the growth of the city. So now I want to talk about the operating budget. The tax rate remains 4.78. It includes money for salary adjustments for 4%. That's an average. Some get more, a little bit more, some get less. It all depends. It adds positions in police, fire, economic development, development services, public works. It separates Copper Sky Multi-Gen Center from parks to get a truer picture of what the facility is actually costing us to run. With our new community services director coming in, one of the things that I'm going to have him focus on is what is it costing us to provide specific programs and services, and what are we getting in return? In other words, for softball, what's it cost us to put those on, and what are we getting in return? And so what's the ratio of money spent to money getting in, and subsidy levels, if you will, for the city. And then we'll bring those forward to BFO to say, okay, are we hitting the right subsidy levels for you? Are there different programs that you want to look at? But by separating parks from the facility, it's going to give you a true picture of what that facility is costing us to run and what the subsidy is for the city. It also includes reductions in Copper Sky budget of $600,000. We have a contingency of $1.5 million, as I told you before. $500,000 of that is for spending capacity for the future, if you would like it this year. We have centralized computer replacements. In the past, each department put their own computers in their budgets. This gives you a little bit more transparency in terms of what our IT costs are for the city, and it helps us manage those costs better by doing this. Asset inventory, right now we don't have an inventory of the assets of the city. We need to have that. This is funding for a company to come in and do the asset inventory, because we don't have the resources to do that right now, and then giving us all of the data and the information and the software to manage that inventory in the future. It gives us a little bit of seed money, if you will, to start a geographic information system, which is key for the city, especially as you continue to grow. It's going to be contract services. It's not an FTE at this point. Down the road, 2, 3 years, 4 years, it could be an FTE for you. But at this point, it's finding a contractor or MAG or CAG or somebody who can come in and start developing a GIS system for us. Somebody who's taking existing, there's a lot of data out there, taking existing data and compiling it into a database for us, a usable database, so we can start using that data, if you will. It increases a little bit for facilities maintenance. City Hall is 5 years old now. The police admin building is approximately the same age. So you're going to have to start contemplating replacing furniture, chairs, things like that. And so you got to start budgeting for that. So this has I think it's like a $50,000 increase in that just for potential facilities maintenance in the future. It increases money for cybersecurity, which is always a big issue for governments or any organization, if you will. And then it includes a tuition reimbursement program and $75,000 for that for the city, which I think makes us more attractive as an employer. Most other cities have such a program. And to me, it's a win-win. You get educated employees, and employees see you investing in them, and it's more commitment for the organization. Really what we tried to focus on, or what I tried to focus on, was the administrative areas of the organization. You know, with all the growth that we're having and with permits and people coming through the door, and more employees means more computers and things like that. I tried to balance public safety with operations. You know, it's always a hard decision. We never have enough money to fund all the positions that we need to fund, especially for public safety. But I tried to balance that with, there was also a lot of support areas in the organization that truly need increased capacity to handle the administrative side of operations for the city. So what you've got on the public safety side is a sergeant and a dispatcher. And for fire, we've got one firefighter. This allows for getting a captain over resources, because I have moved fleet under fire. They're sharing the same building. It helps on administrative oversight, reduce the cost a little bit there. And as we build fire admin right there, we're going to have a complex, really, of fire admin, fleet, and fire fleet, if you will. And then one of the things we want to do is convert an existing mechanic position to a management analyst position to support fleet, because a lot of fleet is paperwork, if you will. There's a lot of regulations you have to do and paperwork you have to follow and track, maintenance records and things like that. We have somebody in the organization that's truly interested in learning fleet, and it will give us a succession plan for that position, because fleet is one of those rarities where you don't have a big pool of resources out there when you need a fleet supervisor. So it'll give us a succession planning for the future with that. And then on the other side, we've got converting 3 part-time positions to full-time to get a little bit more capacity in development services, city clerk and HR. And then we've got some full-time positions for economic development, IT, financial services, and public works. One of the things that we did with budget finance and operations is get some directions on contingency planning or contingency funding. So the decision was that if we get a SAFER grant, which we're applying for, the match for that grant, which would be approximately $60,000, would come out of contingency. The same thing for police officers, we're going for a COPS grant. If we get the COPS grant, the match of $66,000 would come out of contingency. And then finally, the 347 scoping study, if the city in the future wants to pony up some money to kind of show that, you know, this is really important to us, we want to invest in it, we want to get things going, moving forward, then the decision was that that would come out of contingency as well. So these 3 things are kinds of as if you need them, but they're not set in stone, if you will. The other
City
thing-
Manager, I just want to interject there. So on behalf of the BFO, which is against Councilmember Smith and Vice Mayor Chapados and myself, you know, as we work through this, one of the things we always hesitate to do is budget from a contingency standpoint, clearly. But in this particular case, because we are, you know, at our limits, we needed to plan and to make some really crucial decisions on some of these items. And so, you know, I think the city manager's done a good job of bringing this to us now so that you understand that while we didn't want to move this in a budgetary fashion, because it is possible that it may not be asked of us. And a good example of this is the SR 347 scoping study. This study is taking place as of October of this year. MAG has agreed to do it. You know, they are in discussions with our staff. We're you know, possibly saying that you know, they might ask us for a portion of this, up to $150,000. It costs much more than that, but this would be our contribution. But then there's also the question of, does this need to come from us or can it come from the RTA? And so, you know, at the end of the day, these are all questions, but we needed to make sure it was in here so that you all were aware that we were planning on it, we were planning for it. It was from the get-go. You had the opportunity to see it, and that's why we would put it into contingency, because there is the potential. We may never get it. We may never be asked for it. We may not need it. And so we didn't want to budget for it and take something else below the line that we absolutely needed, that we know we needed now, when something may actually be contingency. So we just wanted to let you know that was the premise of these 3 items on the contingency side. And we were in agreement of that from a subcommittee standpoint, but again, that's for your knowledge and ultimate vote. Thank you. Yeah, by all means.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it may not be relevant, but the police officers, the COPS grant match, is there any tie-in to the SROs in that?
That's a better question for Chief Stahl, I think. The question is the COPS grant match, is there a tie-in to the SROs in that particular case? I know that we had a discussion at the BFO, asked the question on the ability to use the COPS grants for what we felt was needed, i.e. what the department felt was needed, and you answered in the affirmative, but if you want to take that, please take it away.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Councilmember Wade. The COPS grant announcement has not been made yet. It will normally be made late May, early June, and then they will list their priorities of importance of what they will fund. If I were a hypothesizing person, I would say their areas of focus are going to be the opioid epidemic and mental health. Those would be the 2 areas that I know for a fact they are focusing on at the national level. They're trying to push down as much as possible the school resource officer to the state level, and yet some of the states have not taken that opportunity to do so. So there may be some additional funding for SRO, additional resources in that area, but we haven't seen it yet, and I'm not guaranteed they're going to go that direction yet.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Any other questions on those particular items before the city manager moves on? Thanks.
I would like to add to that traditionally, I believe, Chief, the SRO funding the requests have to come from the schools, correct? It's not from the city. Yeah, except for the national level. So at the state level, it's traditionally come from the schools and not from us. And one of the things we've got is we're going to partner with the new superintendent now that she's on board. That's one of the things I'm going to be talking to the new city manager when he gets here is to start building that relationship. And one of the things that I think they need to focus on is school safety. We also added, or the BFO added $1,400 for bus shelter maintenance. We have 2 bus shelters, I believe, in the budget for next year or this year to put in. So this is for maintenance. And then we're increasing the city attorney budget $50,000. So I want to talk a little bit about the capital improvement program. This is the major funding sources. The biggest one is transportation impact fees. General government, which is your general fund, is the second one. And then you've got your other fees and charges. So a total of about $22.6 million in the CIP program. In terms of what we're funding with that, the vast majority of that $22.5 million is for streets and transportation. And then the biggest chunk after that is for the fire admin building. Again, we're front-loading that full construction this year. So the money's there, but I don't anticipate that all of it will be used this coming year. And then vehicles, $1.4 million. That does not include any big fire trucks. It's more transportation vehicles and brush trucks and things like that. And then we have, I have to note, we have $425,000 for pickleball courts. Yay. It's for 8 new pickleball courts at Copper Sky, which will give us the ability to hold some tournaments. And that includes all the amenities that would go along with it, lighting and fencing and things like that. And that would come from our parks diff monies.
So
And then we
just
also have-
by way of clarification there, again, to the council, and we obviously have some supporters in the room, obviously, and you've received emails, et cetera, but this has been something that we've been talking about for over a year and trying to figure out. But, you know, as you know, we had been presented with a variety of different options of thoughts, and I, you know, also encourage that. I think we're all encouraged thinking outside the box and trying to find ways to make things happen. You know, one of the things people fail to understand is that, you know, the restrictions that are put upon us as electeds is that we don't have free reign and the ability to pull money from wherever and put it wherever we want. We have to deal with the buckets that they're in, and a lot of the buckets have certain restrictions and rules as to where we can get that money from. And so in the discussion of trying to figure out how to make this happen, you know, we really did kind of go down the approach of what it meant to revamp a couple of the courts, but in trying to think outside the box, we were able to come up with the understanding and the legal definitions of the fact that we could use DIF fees, again, development impact fees that have been acquired by the city over the years as those things come in as mandatory per the city code, and those can be specifically used for improvements to add certain amenities. And so we were able to look at that amount, look at the future projections, look at all the different avenues that go into that. And there's obviously been other requests as well, but typically they go much larger. And then in this particular case, we were able to find that money. So again, that comes specifically from a DIF fee and not from the general fund. And that's why that amount is possible, because it is their money sitting there aside for this particular issue. So anyways, that's why it's in there. So hopefully that'll play well.
Yeah, and the last one I want to note is that we've got money in there for the Zephyr relocation. So the total budget for 18-19, the blues above are your revenues, the reds are your expenditures, and the total transfer from the general fund reserve, if everything gets done in that next fiscal year, is $3.9 million. As I said again, I don't expect fire admin, which is budgeted at $4.65 million, to actually use all that money. So I would imagine that this transfer is going to be significantly lower than this. And with that, I'll ask any questions that you may have.
Council, questions? Yes, Councilmember Smith. You.
Yeah, I don't have any questions since I served on the BFO and helped to put this together along with the staff and our interim city manager, and they did a great job. Couple of things that I wanted to point out, because they're important to me, and I think they're probably important to residents, is there was one line item that indicated that the Copper Sky budget was reduced $600K. That's significant. If that progress hadn't been made, you would have seen the draw from the general fund balance at $600K higher. I think there's still work to be done there, and I think with our new community services director, hopefully we'll make a little more progress on that. But I thought that was a huge success for the department and a huge success for the city of Maricopa. I do agree with the idea of putting $500K in contingency and evaluating mid-year based on revenue. But I have to tell you, Tricia, I'm excited about additional revenues that can help to refill our general fund balance. And so I'm going to be looking at it from a very constructive, very analyzing perspective of, do we really need to add any additional positions, services mid-year? Or really, should we start to that graph that you have that brings those two lines closer and closer within a 5-year period. I'm very conservative. I don't want to head in that direction. I'd rather see that graph start to tilt back up. And so I'd like to see revenue that we haven't actually put into the budget considered for filling back up the general fund balance. But that's my perspective, and that's down the line.
And one of the things I forgot to mention, the slide that said new revenue streams that weren't budgeted, the Denny's, we got the March figures, sales tax figures for them, and it was $7,400. So we'll get an additional, if that continues, which I fully expect it to, we'd get an additional approximately $30,000 this fiscal year that we didn't budget for.
Yeah.
And then another almost $90,000 next fiscal year that we didn't
Yeah,
budget.
that's really exciting. And I know that we're thin in some of our departments, so I definitely want to look at what those needs are mid-year. But for me, the two lines are merging together much quicker than I want them to. And so I'd like to see us start to replenish that general fund balance.
And that's a discussion we're going to have with
Yep.
BFO.
Yep, thank you.
Councilmember Brown?
No,
Did
I
you
don't
have
have
a-
any.
Okay. Councilmember Wade?
I don't have any comments on the budget other than to say thank you very much for you and your staff that got in there and got to work and put this together. And when we were looking at an interim city manager, we wanted somebody who was able to understand the needs of Maricopa, the needs of our budget, and understand the budget process. And there was no doubt that you were the person to do that. So I want to make sure that I tell you how much I appreciate the effort that you put in and the leadership that you've given to put the budget together. All together.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Vice Mayor.
I want to echo those sentiments. I also want to thank all the department directors. You continue to think outside the box. You continue to look for additional ways to fund stuff. You let us know all of your needs, and you had the justifications to support those requests. I also want to make a special mention to Finance, to Brenda, to Angel, and to Valeria for your work on putting everything together. For me, this was the most enjoyable budget cycle I've had yet since I've been on council. So it was very smooth. The information was presented in ways that we could relate to it quickly, understand it, connect it to other departments. So thanks for a very, very enjoyable process.
Yeah, I'll echo those. This is the fun stuff we get to go through in the Budget, Finance, and Operations Committee. And, it's a lot of line by line, a lot of paperwork, a lot of explanation as to why this happens or that happens. I know that city council members have come and gone, and the BFO has sat there the entire day. Again, many thanks to the directors and to staff and to the other members of the BFO and the council who've come and listened in. It's a really long process, but it's really important if you're going to go through everything and know exactly where the money's being spent and why and how, and think of all the unintended consequences and try and predict the future and all the other things that go into it. And then you make your decisions. And I'll tell you, the hardest thing about this job is that, every one of these directors defends their department and why they need what they need. And sometimes we have to play the bad guys and say, sorry, you're not going to get that. It's really hard to do. And so, again, it's not for lack of wanting to. I wish we could afford everything that everybody wanted. But, again, just like you all have to do, we have to budget from our kitchen table. We have a budget we have to live within, and we can't spend money that we don't have. And so we have to make sure that we play that really carefully. So, again, many thanks to everybody who's participated in that process and gotten it to this point today.
I would just like to say, next steps, we're going to post the tentative budget on the website. At the June 19th council meeting, we're going to have a public hearing and truth and taxation hearing, and then final adoption of the budget. And then in July, we'll have the property tax ordinance adoption.
Perfect. All right, council, do you have any questions on the budget at this time? Any further things that we didn't address, or questions you'd like answered, information you'd like delved into? Anything? Okay, well, with that, we have about 15 minutes to 7 here. I'm not sure if we can hit our next E-session item in 15 minutes. Do you think we can, city manager? No? Okay, well, we'll recess then for 15 minutes. We'll recess for 15 minutes. In the meantime, council, thank you very much for being present for our previous work session, or excuse me, our E-session and on to this work session. So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn, please? So moved. Have a motion, is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion it passes, and we will reconvene in 15 minutes with the city council regular meeting. Thank you.